discomfort is actually pretty discomforting, but you have to look at it and really pierce through it and look deeply to see that that's true. This is the hamster wheel. It's like, okay, well, I'm doing all this because this is providing this quote unquote stability in my life. But really, as you said, like at the beginning of this podcast, it's making people miserable. So it's like you have this illusion of comfort, but it's really just familiarity. Through meditation, taking calm and slow breaths sends signals to your mind that your body is safe. So your mind and your nervous system starts to respond to that because...
Hi, good peeps. This is the next episode of the Flexible Neurotic Podcast. I'm Dr. Sarah Milken, the Flexible Neurotic. Today, I have a guest who's an author, podcast host, and influencer with over 400,000 on social media. His posts are so good that you want to screenshot every single one of them. His daily thoughts on mindfulness and mental clarity reach over 1 million people each week on Instagram. His podcast is all about personal growth, and he chats with thought leaders in self-development. His new book is Brave New You, a roadmap to believing that more is possible. It's exactly that, a detailed roadmap that will take you through pages and pages of your own notes. We were just talking about that before recording the podcast. He's also been a leader in the meditation space for 25 years. I think a lot of us could use a little bit of that. And his name is Cory Allen. Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm so happy to have you here. I just told you, you're in Austin, I'm in LA. My AC wasn't working and I'm already in a full sweat. And you're probably not, but you're not having a midlife sweat. You're having an Austin sweat. I'm having a little bit of a
Yes.
midlife sweat.
I will tell you that, I mean, sweat, you know what I mean? But like, I will tell you that whenever I read the audiobook for my first book, it was during, I think, August or something like that. And so it was 110 outside. And so, of course, you can't have the air conditioner on. And I have a studio in my house, but still, there's an air conditioner. So no air conditioner. So I was reading it all day, and I have a bunch of gear turned on. So it was adding heat to the room. So I was like soaking wet reading this book about mindfulness and being in the present moment. I was just
Finding your inner strength, but you probably lost 10 pounds. It's like a
yeah,
sauna.
yes,
It's like an
totally.
Andrew Huberman ideal scenario, but you needed to do the cold plunge right after.
It's for real. Yeah. It's just like drinking pickle juice the entire time.
I love it. Okay, so I know we talked about this before we started, but the intention of this episode is to dive into these ideas of elevating, reinventing, and figuring out what's next for us in midlife. I know you're not a midlife woman, but I know you're married to one. And
Yes.
you're a thought leader in a lot of these things. So for my demographic, for this podcast, for my platform, we're midlife women. And your book was so amazing and detailed. I was like, this could be like a 5-hour episode. So what I did was I went in with my kind of midlife woman lens and picked out 10 things. And I'd like to go through those 10 things. There's probably 39,000 things. But it's really sort of like the 10 things for midlife women to become the braver and newer version of themselves. Is that
Beautiful.
cool?
Yeah, I love that. Love that. Also, whenever you noted that I wasn't a midlife woman. I mean, I'm curious if anyone listening, the sound of my voice up until then, they were like, wait a second. I
I
thought
know
that was
I've
definitely a
actually
midlife
had 3
woman.
or 4 men on the podcast. So, but I think everyone just assumes that whoever I have on the podcast is going to relate to the topic. Um, but in your book, you talk about how people who elevate their lives, there's one thing that they have in common, and they believe it's basically that they believe that there's more possible for themselves, that this just can't be it all the time. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's a great place to start. I mean, ultimately, what happens to all of us is that before we become aware or self-aware, we're going through life and we're basically having our lives formed around us. We're living in a state of reaction, because we are growing up, becoming adults, figuring out who we are, what we like, kind of what the world is like. And in that, we're just reacting to a lot of things and everything we experience. We don't learn, and no one teaches us how to be present, how to be aware and intentional about how we're living in our lives. And so, because life is challenging and complicated, we continue to live in this momentum of reaction to what's happening in front of us, not thinking about really what we're doing, but rather just doing it and reacting to what we happen to experience. And so then over a long period of time, what happens is that our life kind of takes on the shape of its own and it feels like it's out of our control. And so because these patterns of living and thinking that we get into over a long period of time, over the majority of our life, seems so familiar, we mistake that for all that's possible, right? And so we're like, it's not all there is, it's just what's happened. And so we think, oh, well, this is quote unquote normal. It's like, no, these are just the things you happen to have experienced up until this point. These are the thinking habits and the behavioral patterns that you've instilled. And the reason why they seem so finite, and this is what limits a lot of people, is that because they form so gradually. It's like it happens so gradually that we don't notice that they're forming these different ways of seeing the world and these patterns of living. And ultimately, these patterns, it comes down to thinking about ourselves. And so it happens so gradually that whenever we find ourselves in our 40s or 50s, then we're like, well, I lived an entire life. And I've tested the boundaries of this and that, and this is what there is. And anytime you catch yourself saying this is what there is, and not something that defies the laws of nature, you're not going to be like, well, I'm going to go dunk on LeBron. It's like, no, it's like, this is the general ecosystem of my life. Like one should listen to that because it's like you're literally saying out loud the limiting idea and you're defining your reality by saying that. And whenever you begin to hear yourself drawing those boundaries on your own existence, that's an opening point of whenever your awareness can raise and you can recognize the issue from the beginning. And that's kind of how we start in the book is noticing and learning to be more mindfully aware of your own thinking patterns and what is arising in the present moment, what thoughts and feelings are arising, so that you can recognize those and then choose intentionally to act differently in that moment and think differently about yourself, therefore creating a different outcome of your future.
I love all of that because I also think like as midlife women, I tend to describe it as the hamster wheel. It's like
Hmm.
we're moms, we're wives, we're career women, all the things, but sometimes it begins to feel like Groundhog Day and the hamster wheel and like you're never going to come off of it. And sometimes it takes like an outside disruption or somebody gets sick or something happens to actually get us off that hamster wheel. And I think for me and for a lot of listeners, it's not waiting for that thing to happen. It's kind of trying to drum up enough internal fire and energy to get our own selves off of that hamster wheel. And that's
Hmm.
really hard, like you said, because we've been doing the same thing over and over and over again for so many decades.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're so right. I mean, generally people have big growth moments, especially when there's traumatic intervention. That's whenever someone's like, well, I quit my job and I moved to Thailand or whatever, and this and this and this. And I think the key is, recognizing that you don't, first off, that like making big changes, and this is something I point to in the book, like making big changes all at once isn't necessarily a great idea. It's not a bad thing, but it is impulsive. And so if it's going to be impulsive, it is kind of rooted in some reactionary type of thing because you're not really thinking through it and giving it time to unfold so that you can be mindful of the details. But that is actually should be an encouraging sentiment because, you know, whenever we are flipping the script a little bit, instead of waiting for something to happen to us to get us off that hamster wheel, we can recognize like, okay, I want to make a change. And that's like A1. That's the first thing that you need to do. And so whenever you recognize that you need to make that change, then the heartening part of it is that you're like, well, I don't have to shave my head and, quit my job and completely turn my life upside
And
down.
buy a Porsche and get a new
Yes,
wife and
exactly.
have the whole midlife crisis thing.
Yeah. And because also those changes, because they're impulsive and reactionary, aren't sustainable generally, and they come out of desire and all generally delusion. It's because there's a root problem that we're trying to fix, and we think if I make this massive shift that is rather chaotic, that will fix what this thing is. But it's like, no, that's just going to create another form of distraction that you're going to have to work to until you actually find the real problem, right? Which is ultimately wanting to have some say and control and direction in your life in a new way that feels fresh. That's why someone has the midlife crisis and they go buy the Porsche and they're like, well, this will be a way I can re-identify myself. It's like, no, you're re-identifying yourself using things outside. You need to re-identify yourself on the inside with the way that you think about yourself. That's how this works. I don't know why I'm getting so aggressive about this. I'm just feeling really,
No, I
it's
because
very,
you can feel the midlife energy, like, oh my
yeah.
God, what's next for me? I totally get it. And I think another thing that you talk about in the book is I think so many of us are focused on the material. And we think that by buying something or taking that trip or whatever, that somehow that's going to fix us. And research does show that novelty, that we seek novelty every 5 to 7 years, and that's cool and that's okay. But you're talking about a different kind of change, a change from the inside, not necessarily the car, the thing, the house.
Oh, totally. Yeah, because all that stuff is just, it's all nonsense, Um, and so the cool part about small change is that, whenever someone's on that hamster wheel, they don't have to burn everything down and start over. They can realize that, like, all right, I want to make a change. Let's get clear on what that is. Like, even you could say, I don't know where I'm going, but what do I not want to be a part of anymore? What are the ways that I think about myself, the ways that I present myself to the world, the ways that I let other people or kind of or the world have some say over me that I don't want anymore? Let's start with letting go. Let's start with creating boundaries and things like that. And you can create these small changes where in moments you could be like, you know what, actually going to speak my mind. I'm going to start speaking my mind in this moment. I'm going to start creating space for myself in my own life. That could be something that's something small, it's something incremental, and it's an easy thing to start doing after you kind of get clear on something that you want to change. And then after you get used to that change in your life, you can then go, well, you know what? What's something else I want to let go of? And you're like, I don't like friends of mine that just, like gossip and talk shit and are negative, and I always feel drained after I'm around them. Like, I don't want that energy in my life anymore because I want to feel full and energized, not like anxious. And so I'm going to spend less time with the people that make me feel depleted. And now you've made another small change. And then once you practice realizing and allowing and letting go and kind of separating from a lot of things you don't want to be associated with anymore, then you could be, okay, cool. I've created this space for myself. Now, what are things I want to add? What's something new I want to do? What's a new way I want to, realize myself in the world? And you can start making those changes. And that's a really beautiful way to progress because that type of slow, steady progress is sustainable. And it also becomes really ingrained in who you are and how you present yourself to the world. And another really valuable thing of this iterative process of slowly making these small changes is that, you know, like we feel good when we accomplish a goal. And if you set an attainable goal for yourself, something small like that, and you just make one little change in your life, you feel good about yourself. And it starts building your self confidence and your self trust and your self belief and allows you to believe that, you know what, I can make another change and another change. Another positive thing about taking that approach is that as you start to make this shift in your life, the people in the ecosystem of your life do not have a resistance to it. Because that's one of the big issues. Say we're in midlife and we go, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm gonna make this change. I'm getting full sleeve tattoos. What I've always wanted. That's what I'm doing. And you're like, you do it all at once in one weekend, and then everyone you see for the next 2 years is like, oh my God, what happened to you? But you go, you get one that you like, then you get another one. People are like, oh, yeah, they got a tattoo. Oh, they got another one. Then they got
That's
another.
like my husband with golf right now.
Is
Like,
that right? Oh,
oh,
did
yeah, he just picked up golf. Oh, yeah, now he like wants to join a country club. Oh, yeah, he's taking a golf lesson. And now it's like becoming over the past year, it's become like its own thing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And that's great because that way it's not like, it's gradual and it's organic and people can accept it. And you can also, give yourself the time and the space to redefine, who you are and how you think about yourself in a more organic way.
And then there was me. I was like, hi, I'm starting a podcast and I've never had social media before. And here I am. But for me, it was like having that idea and like bringing it to myself and like being public about it. It was slow growth, but I had to like just come out and do it because sometimes you just have to like step off the hamster wheel and be like, okay, I'm here. I have 0 followers and 0 podcasts, and here I am. I'm gonna
Yeah,
start.
yeah. No, that's great. That's great. And I mean, to me, that is one of those types of small changes. It's like, because like you said, it was starting with at zero and being a cool, let's work towards building this and becoming what you are today,
I
you
think
know?
what's hard about being this age and older is being a beginner and starting something from scratch feels very foreign.
Hmm.
Like for me, in my mind, I was like, wait, like I got a PhD, I did all these things, and like now I'm like starting way at the beginning at ground zero. And it's very hard to sort of recalibrate yourself to being a beginner again.
Yeah. I mean, I like doing new things pretty consistently because of that. I like to feel I think for me, one of these useful things is having a relentless curiosity and openness to what's fresh and what's new and something unique. And I want to always be learning about things. And I know I find it really fun. Like, I think it's really fun to get into something that you know nothing about and kind of get in that beginner's mind, because then what I do, anyways, like how I handle it is I'll look at some space that or something that I'm completely unfamiliar with, and I'll be like, all right, let me be a beginner and try this and get familiar with this newness. But then I think, how am I thinking in this moment in a relationship to this new thing? Like, look how present, spacious, and unassuming my mindset is. Now let me apply that to the things I'm good at and see how much better I can get at those. Because once we get good at something, and a lot of times we shave down our curiosity and our openness and flexibility to new information around those things, and that limits our mastery. And so I like to kind of like use that, apply that template of original mind to things I already know, and ultimately I'll try to do that just in life in general as much as possible.
That's a great point, and my husband's much better at it than I am. I always talk about this on my Instagram, like, he's like the master hobbyist. Along with his career, it's like, "Oh, I'm gonna take up piano," and then he becomes like a piano expert. "Oh, I'm gonna take up golf." And I think for me, and you touched upon this in your book too, I don't feel like I have as many tangible hobbies, and we'll talk about this towards the end, but you do talk about how self-expansion and self-transformation can be a hobby unto itself. And I fucking love that because I was like, oh my God, I feel so much better about myself.
Nice. I love that. And it's the best hobby, because it changes everything else.
But
It's
it's
like,
so hard because it's not a tangible one. So you go to a dinner party and someone's like, what do you do? And you're like, oh, I'm a fucking self-expansionist. I mean, you know
no,
what I
no,
mean?
you
It's
just got
like
to
my
be.
husband can talk about the golf and the piano. And I'm like, I'm talking about this woo-woo intangible thing.
No, it's all in the language and so in the confidence. So whenever someone asks me, like, what do you write about? What are you into? I'm like, I'm interested in human consciousness. And then everyone's like, holy shit, tell me more about that. And it's like, well, gladly. And so it's all about the packaging. You just gotta market it right whenever
Totally.
you're in
You have to
conversation.
own your shit at this point, I think.
Yeah, yeah. But if you talk about being interested in, consciousness and the human experience and researching that within yourself and the world, then it becomes this cool philosophical existential exploration as opposed to like Well, being like, what do you do? It's like, well, I had a terrible childhood, and so I've been trying to autodidactically teach myself ways to recover for 40 years.
Right. Or you've taken up golf.
Yes.
Sounds a lot easier. Okay, so in going through our 10 things here. So number one, in my mind, reading your book, then the first thing I saw was we have to overcome our mental stories. And that was like the first of the 10 things that I noticed in your book. And our mental stories in my mind is like your inner bitch, your inner voice, and all the things that come with that. Can you tell us how you manage not your inner bitch, your inner mean boy or whatever?
I'm just thinking this is a real missed opportunity that I didn't call part one, defeating your inner bitch.
Yeah, you should have called
Um,
me. I could have helped
yeah.
you through that because I'm the queen of that.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I mean, I deal with it like this. Like if it's just a negative arising thought that happens in the moment, the best way to deal with that for me is simply shining the light of like reality and truth and objectivity on it. So if I'm about to do something and I have this limiting thought of no, like you can't do that, you won't be able to do that. Who do you think you are? Whatever the thing is, I will immediately snapshot that thought, separate it from me in terms of like, my identity. It's not me, it's just something that arose in my mind, and then I look at where's the proof? Like, look at reality. Where are the facts? Well, there are none. There's nothing that says that I can't do this. This is just a negative thought that's arising. And then, from there, after recognizing it, exposing it, I should say, for what it is, it's very easy just to let it go. And I generally, my response to it is immediately taking action. So if I'll have this thought that's like, well, you could, like, I'm trying to think of a real one because fortunately I don't have them so often. But
Like I
if I,
have like one for me is I have an issue with selling.
okay,
So for me, like I have this podcast, it's free content. I have my Instagram account, it's free content. And I have this like inner bitch going, you can't sell something. You can't ask people for money. Who do you think you are? Like, so how would I get around that?
yeah, well, if you start having that thought, you would go, that's like, so the thought would be, who do you think you are? You're like, I'm someone with a lot of expertise and a lot to offer. So this voice of who do you think you are? It's just nonsense, right? There's no proof. There's nothing to back it up. It's just noise, right? Ultimately, so you would recognize it, let it go, and then immediately go to like, I'm going to figure out what I'm going to sell to these people. What do you want? You're going to create a course, you're going to do a book, you're going to do a subscription, a premium tier of your podcast episodes, whatever it is. Then you
Right.
start just moving into it and start doing it, because the second that you recognize that negative arising voice as a lie, then you move into doing the proactive thing that you wanted to do. The moment you start doing the thing, immediately refutes and diffuses the negative rising voice, because it is proving that you can move into the direction of growth that you want to move into.
But is it connected to fear of failure? Like, am I not doing it because I'm afraid no one's going to buy it? And if only two people buy it, have I still succeeded?
Yes, of sure. It's connected to a couple of things. One is it is our, like, in evolutionary psychology, it is ultimately the same voice, and I talk about this a little bit in the book, but it's your mind trying to keep you from being vulnerable. It's basically just trying to keep you safe. So if we're standing next to a raging river, if we're looking over the edge of a building, we will feel almost like there's a magnetic force pushing us back. Generally, we'll take steps back without even realizing it, without being conscious of it. We'll just notice, like, okay, I'm backing up now, because you feel the fear of that thing. The reason why that's in our nervous system is because the fight or flight part of our amygdala in our brain goes, this if this person falls into the river or they fall off the building, they're going to be vulnerable. I mean, you're very vulnerable if you're falling off the side of a building. That's peak.
Obviously.
That's peak vulnerability. And so if
Yeah.
you're vulnerable, you'll be unsafe, and the chances for you dying go very high. Therefore, the animal part of your brain has evolved to try and protect you. And since the the animal part of the brain is actually the foundation of the brain and is the launch pad for intellectual consciousness. We do things on an animal level without being conscious of it because that's who's really running the show is the animal part of our brain. Our intellect is just like fancy fireworks and stuff like that. Just a good processing system. And so if we copy and paste that process of feeling the fear and backing up next to a raging river because we don't want to be vulnerable, and we look at it on an emotional and intellectual way, whenever you go to think, I want to sell this product to somebody, it's the same process that's unfolding, but it's you are feeling vulnerable because if you expose yourself, and this is since it's happening in the mind, now we bring in the ego, right? So if you expose yourself to the world by making yourself for sale, and you're like, okay, will people buy this? Now it's outside of your control. And sorry if this is getting too granular, but
No, I love it.
okay, but then the way in which you identify yourself through your own egoic, you know, um, structure and power becomes vulnerable, right? So you have this image of yourself of like, I am this strong, intelligent, capable human being, yada, yada, yada. And the moment you put yourself out to the world and you offer something for sale, if the chances of people don't buy it makes you vulnerable because then your own identification of your self projected ego becomes up for debate if to yourself. So if you put out there people don't buy it, then you go, oh, maybe I'm not as capable as I thought I was. Maybe I'm not as talented as who am I? Maybe everything in my life is no longer I'm no longer as confident or I'm good as I thought I was. What's going so that's the fear that we have, right? And so it's basically just the same process unfolding. And um, really, the thing to do is just recognize all of that thing that's happening and start immediately moving into action.
But what if you only sell 2 books? I mean, not you
That's just,
personally.
yeah, that
Is
would be
that
bad
I'm just
for me.
saying, is that considered a success? Or is there a
Yes.
judgment piece to that?
No, I mean, it's up to you. I would say most people will judge themselves if they put out something and they sell two copies. But there's a lot of ways to look at that. One is that like success is a compound type of path, right? It is a linear growth path. It always becomes exponential over time. You have to start somewhere. And so those steps that you take to like putting out the first thing and you sell two copies, that's a success. Maybe you're not a bestseller right then, but that's not the point. The point is that you actually did arguably the hardest thing. What is harder than creating a bestseller? Ultimately, creating a bestseller is like I talk about this in social media. It's like you're putting coins into a slot machine. Just keep pumping them in there and keep pulling the thing. And if the timing and the topic and everything lines up, then boom, you'll hit cultural resonance and you'll do well. But with that this is under your control because this means you overcame the fear and all the negative thoughts of not being able to put yourself out into the world and you did it. And what you learn in that process of doing the thing, of putting out the thing, of selling two copies is so incredibly foundational and substantial because then whenever you go to do the next project, now that stuff about like, oh God, can I even put myself out there? Well, now that's gone because you're okay, I know what it feels like. I've moved into the unknown. The areas that used to scare me are not scary anymore because I've been through them. Let's go again at whatever the next product, whatever the next thing is. Let's try it again. And in that process, you continue to discover not only, what it feels like to continue putting yourself out in the world, but you find out what it really is that you want to be putting out there. Because like the path to discovering what the big thing is that becomes big for you is usually like 10 or 15 pit stops along the way because you can't possibly know what the thing is because you haven't gone through all this other stuff yet. So
I
like
think
if you
that's so hard for us because we're so used to instant gratification these days. It's like, I want a pizza, I'm going to get it now. I want to write a book, I can self publish it in 2 weeks. It's like all of these things seem so fast, but the real life journey is actually long.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And it's like what comes fast goes fast, right?
Totally.
And what comes slow lasts for a long time. But like, so if I do something, for example, and it doesn't work out, and it's like, people should keep in mind that you only see the successes of people, of course, because all of the stuff that they had to mess with to get to the thing that was successful, you never saw it because it never went anywhere. But you see the one thing that was really big, and you're like, oh, well, that must have been their first try. It's like, no,
Yeah,
that's why.
she's so lucky. He's so lucky.
Totally. That's why you have the 15-year overnight success. It's like, no, they've been grinding for 15 years and they finally, that slot machine finally hit for them. Um, but this is like what I think about is I don't have any like attachment to, creative output whenever I am working on something because I just understand it's like this process of, you put a thing out there, you work on it, and then if it doesn't work out, you're like, okay, well, cool. Now I know what doesn't work. I know this wasn't the right thing. And then I learned X, Y, and Z from moving through this process. Now I apply it to the next thing. And it'll be like, okay, well, maybe that wasn't the thing. There's another way that doesn't work. And here's what I learned. And I got more clarity on what I'm really trying to aim for here. It's like, for example, between my first and second book, I wrote like probably 10 book proposals and none of them I didn't try to sell any of them, but none of them were like I was just like I give them to my literary agent and she'd be like, no, I hate you, I'm dropping you as a client, this is terrible. um she's like, remember that building you were talking about looking over earlier, you should jump off of it.
Right,
And no,
exactly.
she's very supportive. But no, it would be like, nah, this isn't really working. And so it's just like it's just a part of the process and it
Yeah.
becomes whenever you let go of that resistance to it, it becomes a beautiful part of the
Well,
process that's
maybe it's your
just as
25
exciting.
years of meditation and human consciousness studying that has gotten you to the point where you can get comfortable in the uncomfortable, because I feel like
Mhm.
that's kind of like the bane of a lot of our issues is there's so much comfort in the safe known things, but comfort is great because you can predict, but it can also get really boring and really stagnant at the same time. Like we like the comfort of having a home and potentially a spouse and kids and all of the things. But that can get boring at a certain point too. And we're kind of seeking newer meaning and more novelty and all the things.
Totally. And what's funny about comfort is that comfort is actually pretty discomforting, but you have to look at it and really pierce through it and look deeply to see that that's true. So whenever we have all of the things that we're comfortable with, this is the hamster wheel. It's like you're okay. Well, I'm doing all this because this is providing this quote unquote stability in my life. But really, as you said, like at the beginning of this podcast, it's making people miserable. So it's like you have this illusion of comfort, but it's really just familiarity.
Yes, 100,000% well said. Okay, number two, we kind of just touched on about we need to manage our self-limiting beliefs. It's the second of my 10 things of becoming a braver, newer you. We kind of touched upon the newer on the managing of the self-limiting beliefs. But can you tell us, like, if somebody says, okay, you know what, Corey, I want you to go on stage and give this speech. You've never done it before. How do you talk yourself from going from the place of, oh my God, I can't fucking do this, to actually doing it? Because I think that's the point where so many of us are at. It's like, who am I to do this? How can I be scared and do it anyway? Do I just hold my breath?
And there's a couple of approaches. Okay, so for example, like the last talk I gave was to like 1,500 people in a theater, and it was the first time I'd given this particular talk. It was on a very specific topic of area of mind to a specific audience, and I just was backstage hanging out waiting, and I started like I don't necessarily feel nervous, I just start feeling excited, and then that turns into just energy. And then I just get like I don't know, I just get excited to go out there and do the thing. And the reason why I think that for me that is possible, and I should say that sometimes if I'm doing something where there's going to be a lot of eyes on me, like something like that, I will feel and experience some of the like uh kind of animal symptoms of like maybe I start my adrenaline starts going a little bit, right? But it's not nervousness, it's just excitement, right? The way that I deal with it, the way that I don't know that works for me is it's just I look at it as like it's all fun and curiosity. You know, it's like it's just all about the perspective. So if you're like backstage at this thing about to give a talk and you're like, "Oh my God, you know, like this is horrifying. I'm going to go out there. my mind is going to go blank." That's all looking at it through the lens of fear and as if the audience is against you. But the thing is they're there because they want to hear from you. So they're on your side, right?
That's a good point. That's for
They
sure a
like,
good point.
and it's like,
I was just at Kathy Heller's It's Her Turn to Podcast 3-day summit, and I was on one of the panels as a speaker, and I had never done that before. And I was like, oh my God, there's 300 people. And I said to Kathy, I'm like, how am I fucking going to do this? She's like, Sarah, you're just going to be you, and you're just going to come up
yes.
there and you're just going to talk about, you don't need to memorize this like a speech. You're just going to share your story and talk about it. And she was so right. I don't even remember what I said, but everybody was clapping and coming up to me after. And I was like, holy shit, did I just do that?
Yeah, nice. Well, I mean, congratulations.
No,
It's
but it's
beautiful,
like,
and it's
that doesn't mean I'm not going to be scared the next time. But I know that I've done it once, just like you said.
yeah, yeah, and also like fear in those areas. Like most performers, like their fear never goes away. Like they're not even when they're in it for 20 years, they're not just like, oh, I'm totally just my heart rate doesn't change at all before I go on stage. You know, or it's unnatural as a human to be in front of a lot of people. So you're gonna feel a little weird, and your rods and cones is gonna
Yeah.
get a little wonky, to quote Kramer. Um,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, but but it's just recognizing what's happening and changing your mindset to move into it, to just what you said of like, like I could be scared, and be get tight and everything, but like fuck this, like this, let's have some fun. And you just go out there, you're there for a reason. This is like one of the things I touch on in imposter syndrome. It's like you were invited because you're capable. They didn't just bring you and invite you to give this talk because they had to. They're like, hey, get out there and do that. We know you can do the thing. So just changing the mindset to like, I'm here because I was asked, and I was asked because I'm good. So that's clear. That's the objective truth of that. And then let's go out there and have fun. And I mean, I can go, I don't know, I go pretty dark, or I should say, um, very realistic about things a lot of times. Like if I'm in that situation, let's say I do start feeling a little weird, I'll be like, "Oh, right, you're gonna die." Like
Yeah.
this is so like there's a like billions of people are alive right now, trillions of people have lived, everyone lives and dies, barely anything matters. Like this is just nothing. It feels big because it's a lot right now to me, but it doesn't really matter in the big scheme of things. Once I leave this place, like no one will remember or probably think about
I
this
know
ever again.
we could rationalize everything. You're like, the whole world is falling down and people are starving. I mean, you could
Totally.
rationalize
It's
everything.
like this is not a big deal.
Exactly. I do love how in the book, though, you captured this idea that overthinking is a form of resistance, because
Yes.
that is so fucking me. I'm like rumination station. And it really is a form of resistance, the overthink, because then you kind of pull yourself out of conflict and you're like, well, I don't have to do that. I don't
Yep.
have to do that. That's too hard.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's I just noticed it in myself one day, whenever I was really overthinking something very simple, and I was like, what is this? And and this is kind of what I do with everything. It's like I'll notice something and I'll be like, I need to like study that and figure it out and really analyze and go deep into it. I joke about, I call myself like the Jane Goodall of my own consciousness. I'm just like following my mind around, like taking notes. I'm like, the ape is doing this now. Interesting.
Your
Let's
wife must think that you are insane. Or she's
yeah,
probably like,
probably.
don't overthink my brain. Like my daughter, she'll go, don't use your like weird psychology podcast shit on me.
That's funny. Um, Yeah, so I'll notice something arising and I'm like, this needs investigation. And I just start analyzing from, from a rather zoomed out perspective. And yeah, I just noticed like, oh, I am coming up with reasons not to move through with this because of X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. And generally, um, it is, it's because I don't know, I guess it's a lot of like it, it's like misdirected energy a lot of times. It's like you get caught in your head and you're like thinking, thinking, thinking.
Like you're circling the drain.
It totally, totally, totally. And it's like, no, we need to move this into doing instead of thinking. But you become weirdly enamored with the thinking in this strange way. And it turns, and then it turns into resistance because then you're also like, well, now I don't have to do anything. I can just sit here and like, rock back and forth and for a while instead of actually doing anything. But
And sometimes
again,
I think you need like someone else to yell at you, or maybe not yell, but like my mom, for example, like she was a career woman. She never really focused on like lifting weights and working out. And I said to her, I'm like, Mom, like the key to longevity, like all the research is talking about is exercise and muscle and all the things. And she's like, I know, but I hate it. And I'm like, I do too. And so, I mean, honestly, I bugged her for 2 years, and then I just finally called a gym, made her like a personal trainer appointment, and like was like, "You're going there 3 times a week." And she called me last week and she's like, "I just had my DEXA scan, my muscle, blah, 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 and my bones." And she's like, "Thank you for making me do the thing I didn't want to do."
beautiful.
And I guess my point is like sometimes we can't always do it on our own. And sometimes maybe we need like a friend or a spouse or a kid to be like, okay, get the fuck up and do it. And
Yeah.
I hope, I mean, I think I have with this podcast and my Instagram, it's like sometimes you just need someone to say something in a specific way where you're like, okay, I've heard that all before, but this time it sounded different from this person.
Yeah, totally. And it's good I think, you can vocalize that need to people too. It's like I have a good friend of mine that, you know, if I'm talking about something, I'll be like, yeah, well, I'll do this. And he's like, well, I don't see you promoting that on all your channels. So what are you doing? I'm like, oh, right. I need to close the gap between that, what I'm imagining and what I'm actually doing. What are my actions? Let's bring this into reality. So it's good. And I'll be like, tell me if you hear me talking about something and you hear me basically, just you see a blind spot, then please tell me because I want to know about that blind spot so I can take action. So it's really good to have people like that to vocalize those things. So if you're like, I want to get to the gym, but I feel all this resistance, then tell someone you know in your life that is authentic. Like, hey, will you help me get my shit together and just remind me? And yeah, you're right. It's so useful.
Yeah, sometimes it's just hard to do it on your own. Okay, so number 3 in 10 things about becoming a braver new midlife you is chill the fuck out. I
Mhm.
need that one too.
Yeah.
Tell me about chill the fuck out, even though that's not what you called it in your book. You called it about, you called it be relaxed, be intentional, don't focus on the future, focus on the present. That was a much
Yeah.
nicer way of saying it.
I mean, I like both of them, both ways to say it. Yeah, I mean, the reason why chilling out and being present is important is because of what I started talking about at the very beginning of this podcast. If you are tense and just frantic all the time, you're going to be living in a constant state of reaction. And if you're living in a state of reaction, it means that you're not clear and you don't have intentionality in what you're doing. And so you will end up living a life where you are consistently post event processing, which is basically doing a bunch of stuff and then later thinking back to it and going, oh, why did I do that? I wish I hadn't have said that. I wish I hadn't have done that. Why didn't I do this? Why did I do this? Instead of in the present moment being clear, being able to consider like what repercussions your actions have, what actions that you have, what you're doing will get to closer to what you want, what you actually want at all. And then also the extra added bonus to that is that the expansion of the body being a more calm and relaxed state makes it to where your mind expands and you're able to think more deeply, feel more deeply. You're able to hear people, more deeply. And all of that just compounds and adds up to a richer, more connected human experience.
Now, this leads me into the next one, which is meditation. And it's part of chilling the fuck out. Meditation obviously could be 95,000 episodes. And I know you've been doing it for 25 years and you're a thought leader in it. But for the average midlife woman like myself, who's like, I don't have time to do that. It's annoying. I don't understand it. I don't know
It's annoying.
how. Like, I have to pee. I want some snacks, whatever it is.
Oh my God.
But what are like if you were just to break it down into like, I don't know, a few concepts of like why do we need it? What's the easiest way of doing it? What's the shortcut until we can get to the long form of it?
Yeah.
I made you turn bright red.
That little internal dialogue was amazing.
Well, that's my verbal diarrhea from my brain.
Yeah, yeah, okay. So the short form version is that, I think a person should ultimately understand like what it is that they're going for. Like, why are you doing this? Because if you don't know the why, then it's going to be pointless and you'll have no dedication, you'll have no commitment to doing it because you don't know why you're doing it. There's no reason.
Oh, because Cory
So,
told me to.
yeah, I mean, that should be a qualifying reason. But no, because it's not meaningful if you don't have a why, right? And so we could look at the most kind of just boilerplate level
Yeah.
of it. It's like you will feel less anxious and you will think more clearly. Okay. I think everyone probably wants that. Feel less anxious, think more clearly. It's pretty nice because if you're less anxious, that means that you'll enjoy your life more. You know, you won't make decisions out of fear, you'll make them out of excitement and curiosity. And if you think more clearly, it means that you'll have deeper relationships, a more successful personal life. You'll know yourself better, which means that you can then continue to shape your life in a way that will make you feel happier and more fulfilled. You'll connect with your children better, and so on and so on.
What's the
And
bare
so
minimum, Cory?
that of actual meditation.
Yeah, of
Yeah, so
actual
that's
meditation, because people are like the 3 minutes, the 23 minutes, the 17 minutes. Do you listen to a guided one? Are you supposed to just do like you're talking about in your book, the rise and fall of the breath? Like break it
yeah.
down for us.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, the bare minimum would be being full on anxious, reactive, pinball human on autopilot and just, remembering now and again when you can remember to stop and take one single deep breath and relax your muscles as you exhale. That's the bare minimum of just
Okay,
in
maybe
all of
maybe
the
slightly more advanced than that.
yeah, I'm gonna ratchet it up a little bit. But I'm saying
Okay.
if somebody is really struggling and they're just a whirlwind, each time that you remember to go, hold on, stop, one deep breath, breathing in, relaxing the muscles in your entire body as you exhale, like that for that person who's in chaos will be useful. But
Mm.
let's say we're not at that peak state of chaos. If every 5 times a week, and you have to do it 7 times a week, if you spend 5 minutes where you just turn off the phone, turn off the laptop, whatever, and sit, close your eyes. You don't have to do anything other than just take slow, calm breaths in and exhale and just kind of relax the muscles in your shoulders and neck as you exhale. And just pay attention to your chest rising and falling, just noticing your breath going in and out. And just do that for 5 minutes. And once you do that, the important part of it is compound gains because you'll do it once and then someone will go, well, I didn't really feel anything. Or they'll be like, I feel a little bit more calm. That's fine. But then it won't be enough for them to want to do it again. Then if you do it 2 or 3 days in a row, you'll notice like, okay, this I actually feel a little bit more calm, but still it's not a ton difference. If you do it 5 days in a row for a couple of weeks, I would say 2 weeks, what will happen is that, and this is one of the things that I, post on Instagram is like the mindful awareness fades in, right? So this isn't like a light switch, doesn't click on in one day. You're like, oh, I'm a levitating Zen master. It's like you will
The
slowly
slow drip.
you'll slowly start to realize things in your life. For example, you'll be in a conversation where normally you would have just had this reactive comment that would have been defensive or negative or whatever or avoidant, and you will recognize the desire and the urge, or what would be normally labeled as the impulse, to say that before you actually say it. And you'll notice there's spaciousness there in the present moment. So instead of saying something like your partner says something and you would just have some sarcastic or cynical or reactionary comment because you're annoyed, you would feel the annoyance, you would recognize that you're annoyed, you would notice the arising comment, and then you would go, huh, well, like, I guess I'm not going to say that because it's a shitty thing to say. And instead, I should actually have a conversation, or just not say it at all, or acknowledge what they were trying to tell me, as opposed to just being defensive and aggressive. And that little mechanism, that process, continues to expand and get deeper and deeper and deeper until every aspect of your life has that type of depth and mindful awareness. And that's where the intentionality comes in. That's where you start being able to make these clear decisions really about who you're going to be in the present moment. And what that does is not only gives you great control over yourself, but it also gives you this great deep sense of calm and peacefulness and presence. And then those feelings bring rise to compassion and optimism and clarity. And the reason why, I'm trying to make this super short, but the reason why that happens is because pretty much everyone is in their nervous system state, is in the sympathetic mode, which is the fight or flight mode. That means that, as I've talked about a lot throughout this podcast, you're reactionary, you're just living off of impulses, you're living generally with a low level state of anxiety that fluctuates to high level peaks of anxiety throughout the day. It's because you think the mind doesn't distinguish what's happening outside of your body in terms of a context. It just reads what the body is doing. So if your heart's always beating, you're anxious, you're pounding coffee, you're reacting to things, your body's tense, your mind thinks, your nervous system thinks that your environment is not safe. That's why you're stuck in this fight or flight mode, the sympathetic nervous system state. Through meditation, taking calm and slow breaths sends signals to your mind that your body is safe. So your mind and your nervous system starts to respond to that because it goes, okay, cool. The environment is actually safe. I can relax. I don't have to be in this reactionary fight or flight state. I can calm down. And that moves you over to the parasympathetic nervous system state, which is known as the rest and digest state, which your body naturally switches over to that for a few moments after you eat, after you go to the bathroom, after you have sex, different things like that, because you wouldn't do any of those things if you weren't safe, right? So you're, I mean, generally, um,
Right.
but so your mind, your body automatically goes to that state then. But through the consistent meditation, the consistently taking these calm, relaxing breaths every day, what happens is that you start sending enough signals to your brain to where it goes, my body is physically in a safer space more and more regularly. I can pull out of being in that fight or flight mode and start to introduce some of this restful parasympathetic nervous system state. And what's amazing is that if you continue the meditation, and as you desire to expand the time that you do it each day, even to 10 minutes over, 3 months, 6 months, a year, you will go to where your nervous system is constantly in the parasympathetic rest and digest state, and the fight or flight state becomes the freak occurrence, as to where someone who is always anxious and reactive and feels like a whirlwind, them to feeling calm and spacious and like, ah, that feels like an oddity to them, right? it flips it the inverse to where you're always calm, you're always just clear and intentional and peaceful, and rarely do you actually feel like you're in that jittery whirlwind reactionary state.
Now, wouldn't that be nice?
It is. That's it
Okay,
is.
two little questions. Number one, does it matter if how you breathe? Is it in through the nose, out through the mouth? Does it matter if you only breathe through your nose?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
I mean, there's a million techniques, a million
Yeah,
schools. What's important is that you're breathing calmly and slowly and gently,
got
because
it.
think about again, what are we doing? We're trying to send those signals to our mind that our body is safe. So just
Okay.
relaxing, calm. And I always tell people, because this is a kind of a combination of techniques, it just expedites the process. It's something called PMR. So like progressive muscle release or relaxation. So whenever you're breathing, yeah, I'm sure you noted earlier, like whenever I mentioned exhaling, relaxing the muscles in your body. And I say that with each exhale, just try and relax your shoulders a little bit more. And you exhale again, you just relax them a little bit more. And you'll get to a place where you just feel like it's maximum relaxation, where you're just like, okay, I'm here. But you just keep focusing on that. And you'll notice little nuances where you can just keep sort of softening and softening. That is really useful because one, it gets the signal to the mind that the body's safe. But there's a technique called progressive muscle relaxation, which is actually where it's a way to reduce anxiety on a kind of a neurobiological level, and it's essentially that. It does have the added thing of you exhale and relax all the muscles, then you breathe in and you kind of tense up a little bit again, and then exhale and relax everything again, and you're just trying to get that deep physical expansion because of course the issues are in the tissues, as they say. All of the the emotion and tension does build in our muscles, and so and trauma generally does that too. So being able to release and expand those the muscles in the whole body really is useful in reducing and detoxing ultimately. And I mean that in a kind of I suppose, a metaphorical way, not a metaphysical
Right,
way, but
exactly. But what
detoxing.
about like it's almost like you get double bonuses if you were meditating during a massage,
Sure, yeah,
right?
that's
Like
what I
I was
do.
thinking about like I had
Yeah.
a massage a couple weeks ago and I was like, okay, I can't look at my phone. I'm going to be here. I'm going to stay present. But if I meditated along the way, maybe I would have gotten like double
Oh,
bonus points.
you do. That's what I do. It's totally psychedelic. It's like you're tripping. It's amazing. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to remember that for next time. And I think the other thing I was going to say is, when I went to high school, we didn't have cell phones. We had pay phones. And so couldn't reach my parents or text a friend if I was having some kind of like drama or something happened or whatever. It's just so different now, especially like being a parent and your kids having 24-hour access to you. And I'm so grateful that they connect with me, but sometimes I'm like, did I really fucking need to know that right now? And having that a phone where you're constantly being bombarded, not even just with social media, but it's like messages from your mom, messages from your grandma, like a message from your boss, your husband's annoyed with you. Why was the credit card bill? Whatever. And it's like your nervous system is like constantly reacting to this thing that you're holding in your hand.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It's bizarre. I mean, I grew up, the internet. I mean, I suppose if you'll say the smartphones didn't come out in 2007, I was like 25
I mean, I
whenever
was in college and I was like, we can send an email? Like there's
yeah.
internet? Like what?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's crazy how much it's changed and the pressure, but of course, just recognizing the problem and then creating the solution, which is, you know, here's how I deal with it is I batch time with stuff. So it's like instead of just being available via text, and I don't have any kids, so I'll put it, that's one
Yeah,
thing. But you can, choose what notifications come through on your phone or not. Make it where only your kids can text you. And it's like,
that's
okay,
enough. I'm just
yeah,
kidding.
right. Yeah, totally. No, really, I'm sure it is. But you could be like, you know, I look at my phone once every 3 hours for 10 minutes.
Right.
And it's like all of the texts and emails and social media messages, whatever, like you can work through them and then boom, put it down. You're back in reality for an hour or two. And then like I check my email like a couple of times a day. And it's like, okay, there's a million emails, but let me just knock them out or delete them all right now, as opposed to every three
I know,
minutes
it's
all
very
day
hard to
long.
get out of that feedback loop because you're like, "I just wanna
Yeah.
clear this shit out of here," and then you get back into that frantic mode. Okay, number 5, appreciate how far you've come and don't compare yourself to others. I know we've touched on this a little bit, but I heard that Sam Walton, I think he said something like when he passed away at the end, he said his last 3 words were, "I blew it." Kind of like he spent his whole life, working for this empire, this thing, this money, and now looking back on it like, wow, that's great, but oh my God, I sacrificed so much. But in terms of like looking back on how far you've come, why is that so important?
Yeah. I mean, it's because it's a great way to build self-trust and confidence. All of like life is complicated, it's difficult, and we're all constantly overcoming things. We're all meeting challenges, we're all growing, we're dealing with really hard shit because just being alive is full of tragedy and problems and confusion. And what happens is that we normalize our reality so quickly because it's actually, again, it's an evolutionary feature. It's like we have to normalize things because it's an adaptability thing to deal with the new challenge, to deal with the traumatic experience, to deal with the rising level of stress. We normalize it. So we're just like, oh yeah, I'm adapting to this so I can deal with it. This is what's normal. And let's just keep going, keep moving forward. And what that does is it moves the goalposts for us. And we never feel like we are accomplishing everything. We never feel like we're meeting these challenges. We never feel like we're really growing and becoming stronger and can be self reliant and self trustworthy. And so if you stop and you look back and you think about, like, all right, who was I 10 years ago and who am I today? You'll go, holy shit, look at all the stuff I dealt with. Look at what I've been through. Look at how you, for you example, it's like, look at how all of the challenges I'm sure you've had with your children, just raise anyone with children, raising your
Yeah.
children, just the things you never thought you'd have to deal with that you never even expected. You didn't know their problems. They came in, you recognized them, you dealt with them, you learned how to do it, you're stronger, you're wiser now, and apply that to just everything in life. It's like, so taking a moment to reflect on that and just appreciating everything you've been through, not only does it make you go, wow, I really have done it. I made it. And like, first off, if you're alive, you're crushing it. So it's like, so there's that just from the very bottom level. But like, then you can flip that and shift your mindset. So then next time you see a challenge, you meet a challenge that you think is going to be really tough, when you look back and you go, look at all this other stuff I already did. Like I can do this because look what I've already done here. Like I've overcome these challenges. I've made it through life. I've grown. I've expanded. And this is just one more thing that's gonna be in the rearview mirror of things I've conquered and accomplished. So just remembering how tough you are, how capable you are in the present really can help you move forward with confidence into the future.
I also think it's interesting when you do it with someone else as well. Like my husband and I were saying the other day, we were talking, and he's like, holy shit. Like, if we actually think about what's gone down in the last 2 years, it's really crazy. And I'm like, I
Yeah,
know. Like, how did we do this? Like, how did we get through all of these life moments and we're like still standing here in one piece and like we have a good marriage and our kids are good, but it's like there were a lot of things like parents in hospitals and this and that and kid getting into college, like all these things, a kid going away to college. But it was kind of nice, like stopping and like taking stock of like, holy shit, we did all of that.
absolutely. Yeah, it's beautiful that you all did that
And
and
we
are
don't,
reflecting.
you don't always do that. But like in a marriage, it's a partnership. It's like, no, I mean, at least in my house, it's like everybody's got a role,
Right.
There's certain things he does, there's certain things I do. And it's kind of it has to be an equal balance of some sort.
Yeah, that's
I
fantastic.
mean, it's only taken 27 years, but who's counting? Um, Now, the other part of how far you've come in my mind from your book is the idea of like comparing yourself to others. And
Hmm.
how do we stay out of that? Because it is so hard. People you work with, the carpool moms, all all the people, all the things, the peanut gallery. Like, who am I to start a podcast? Everyone's gonna think this. Who am I to do this? Everybody's gonna think that. How do we get into this sort of staying in our own lane?
Yeah, I mean, I think that comparison is can be useful for motivation, and that's about it, you know. And not even a sense of like I want what that person has or I want to be where that person is. I think you can look at another person and try and deduce a bit of a roadmap from them. Look at like how did they get what did they do to get from point A to point B? Like what moves did they make? And what can I learn from that? How can I apply those to what my goals are? You know, and in terms of comparison, I mean, I totally get the natural instinct to compare. Again, that's another evolutionary quality, that we are meant to we it's a weird system that's not very efficient that our bodies that we've created because we look at someone else, we feel insufficient whenever we see someone that we perceive to be more successful than they are, and then we tell ourselves that we're better than that person somehow. It's not a very
So true. So
it's not a
true.
very useful system.
Well, because
Um,
when we like throw them under the bus for something else, you're like, oh, he's a really good writer, but he cheats on his wife. So like
exactly.
we think of some other shit to tear the person down.
Totally, totally. Yeah. And so, yeah, I think that just recognizing the unfolding of what's happening, again, it's trying to protect you from being vulnerable, trying to, protect you from um, distorting your own image of yourself. It's just all a mental protection game, that comes from, uh, insecurities, right? And so I think that exposing that line of thinking for what it is, and then remembering that each one of us has our own individual and unique life experience and what we can bring to the table. We have our flavor. Like you could take, I like how you're kind of translating my book into your language as we're talking through this. I really do. I think it's
the
really
inner
cool.
the inner bitch language.
Yeah. Yeah. Brave New Bitch. That's the
Yeah,
name of your version.
that's it.
Wow. That's amazing. Okay.
Brave new bitch making midlife sexy again. Let's go.
Yes. That sounds like a bestseller to me. Um, but like you could literally just read each chapter and then rewrite it in your own language, and it would be a totally different book, right? Like you could literally just copy it and rewrite it and be like, here it is in my words, and it's gonna come out totally different because it's being run through your filter, right? And your mind and your life experience and everything that you know. And so all of us have this incredible value. And we just have to remember that. We have to recognize, like, okay, I'm comparing myself to this person, a little insecurity, a little bit of trying to protect myself from being vulnerable. That's just this natural process that's happening. And I'm going to move into constructiveness. Always just redirect to constructiveness, where it's like, cool, that happened. Let's let that go. Now, how can I use them as an inspiration
I
of
love that. I
like
was just going to say that. Like, can you take that comparison and you could either like categorize it as a trigger, like, fuck her, I hate the, whatever, or inspiration, like, oh, he or she is doing that. Maybe I could do that too, or maybe I could do my own thing because they're doing it. I can do it.
100%. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. So just channeling into inspiration and remembering that you have a innate sense of value truly because you're the only one that's lived your life experience.
I love that. Okay. And in your book, you talk about there were three questions that you laid out
Mhm.
for trying to figure out, like, when you get caught in social comparison, like, how do you shut the inner bitch up and go, okay, like, let's get to the bottom of this? And the first question you say is, am I being authentic? The second one is, am I enjoying it? And the third one was, what's my why? Is it still my why?
Hmm. Yeah.
And I love that because I kind of go through that with myself sometimes because with podcasts, I mean, I'm sure, I mean, maybe you haven't or haven't, but there's like this idea of like podcast burnout. Like, oh my God, I've done over like for me over 100 episodes. Like, why am I doing this? Does anyone care? Yes, of course I have a lot of listeners, but like, is that enough to keep doing this? Like, blah, blah, blah. Like, should I just burn down the house? All these kind of things, or like you said before, where we go to these crazy extremes. And I have to keep coming back to myself like, okay, if I woke up tomorrow and I didn't have my podcast and my social media platform, how would I feel? And then I'm like, okay, I'm not shutting it down. I just don't
Yes.
want to do it today.
Yes.
you
Exactly.
know but
Exactly.
it's hard to stay out of those extremes, but I think the authenticity question, the enjoying question, and what's the why kind of like bring you back to, okay, what's really happening here.
100%, 100%. Yeah, because especially just whenever we're tired, like our minds get
Totally.
so,
Oh
if we're
my
hungry
god,
and
I'm
if
like
we're
running
hungry and
away.
yeah, if we're hungry and tired, then
Oh,
it's nuclear,
whew.
So yeah, that's a great exercise, and you're so right, like, and I've done over 500 episodes of my podcast, and it's the train that never reaches the station. You're just
Totally.
always going, and it's easy to think like, oh God, what am I like? How much longer am I going to do this? But I don't know if did I write that, or is this something that you put in there about imagining what it would be like if it was all gone?
No,
Like
no,
how
no. I'm
people.
saying that's me. Like when I
Okay.
read these questions, I'm saying like some days I'm like, I'm blowing it up. I'm done. I'm doing something totally different. And then my husband's like, are you sure? Are you really sure? Or are you just really hormonal and tired?
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
that's because I think the same thing. So I wasn't sure if I wrote it in
oh,
there,
that's
if
so
I just,
funny. That's
yeah,
so
because
funny.
I'll
But you
think about
did
that.
say something about podcast. Maybe you did say something about podcast burnout somewhere, but I don't know if it was related to that.
I think about like that with my social media sometimes, where like I'll be like,
Oh,
I mean, I'm like 500,000 followers. It's like not that many. Like, I don't know. And
and
then
I
I'll
have
be
like
like,
55,000 and I'm like, everyone's like, how did you get it so big? And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about?
yeah, it would never. And then I think, what
It's
if it was? I'm
always
like,
comparison.
totally. And I'll be like, it doesn't really matter. And then I'll think what you just said. I'll be like, well, how would I feel like if it was gone? I'd be like, oh, I would hate that. Yeah, but it is fun. Actually, it's funny. It's like Arthur Schopenhauer is like a Western philosopher that I actually have the same birthday as that I like,
Oh,
and he has a great quote, something to the effect of like, uh, success and money is just like salt water. Like the more you drink, the thirstier you get.
oh, for sure. For
So the,
sure.
the point is learning to be grateful and present with what you do have.
I know. But like you said, sometimes it's just like the monotony of it. And then you've recreated a different hamster wheel. But then I try to like remind myself that this is like the hamster wheel that I enjoy, that I actually want to be on. I'm just tired sometimes.
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, number 7, we've touched on this a little bit, is failure is okay in becoming the braver new midlife version of yourself. Is there a failure of yours that you want to talk about, or something that you feel like took you from point A to point B?
Yeah, let's see. Failure is good. I mean, that's where you learn everything. Let me think of a good one.
It's so hard though. Ugh.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. It's just,
After you
I,
meditate, you mean?
yeah, yeah. I suppose it's just, it's all in how I don't know. It's all the perspective. Okay, I think one that I would say was sizable was, um, I had this. I have a group of author friends that are all successful number one New York Times best-selling authors that we have this mastermind group, and basically we all share our tactics, our ideas, our strategies, our kind of business numbers, everything to just help each other in our careers. And I had this idea a couple of years ago about, or a year ago, about us doing like a theater tour of doing live speaking and whatnot. And everyone was on board. And so I thought, okay, well, how am I going to bring this to life? And so I don't know how doing a theater tour works. I don't know any of that stuff. But I just thought like, all right, well, I know a lot of professional comedians, and so I reached out to one of them, said, "Hey, you have like a tour manager, you have an agency, what's the deal?" And he's like, "Yeah, let me make an introduction." So I had a meeting with them. I told them this idea for this show. Then they said, "Great, I do clubs, but let me set you up with this person that does theaters and or stadium type bookings." Had a meeting with them. Uh, Everything, they loved the idea. It was like a lot of work. Ended up doing a deal with Live Nation as a promoter. We're looking at a bunch of stuff, getting in, et cetera, et cetera. Basically, it was like, it was a lot of work to go from not knowing how it works to dealing with, Dave Chappelle's agency. And it's like, going from zero to that was exciting and also just a lot of effort. And then some things happened, scheduling wise and various other things, to where after all of this effort of building this huge thing, getting it sold to Live Nation, getting a lot of money involved and everything, and even getting a venue involved, the first venue, having to actually cancel it after all of this work and energy built up. Um, so one could look at that and go, it's kind of a part-time job, getting all of that going and getting it,
Totally.
all the moving pieces and the meetings and everything. And then also I was putting, my name is associated with this agency and, all these
So did
people
not
because
enough people buy the tickets, or why'd you have to cancel it?
no, it was some other reasons that I
Okay.
just, to
Yeah.
professional reasons I won't go into, because I'm a classy type of guy.
Yeah,
But
no, but you had your name on it and blah blah blah.
right, right. And so anyway, so one could look at that and be like, all this work and all this stuff, and then it didn't work out. Like, this is the worst. I'm embarrassed, whatever. But literally, my reaction to it was like, well, that was awesome. Like, I met a bunch of interesting people. I learned how you set up, like, how do you set up a theater tour? I made all these connections. I figured out, a couple of, hard truths about some people in people in business and the industry and whatever. And I, just learned all this stuff. And wow, that was really amazing. So now, going forward, if I'm a part of something like that again, I totally know how to do this. I know it's possible to just boom, make it work and bring it to life. And I was just like, that was a win. So I think it's just really about perspective, and not to say, to be delusional about things, but like, what is my approach is just like, what is the use like of looking at something and being like, oh, I'm gonna have a pity party or I'm embarrassed. It's like, no one cares. And
Right.
it's not
You're
doesn't
also obviously a very good compartmentalizer, because my husband is the master compartmentalizer. He's an entrepreneur. So, it's like he's had a million failures, a million successes, and he has an ability to kind of move on to the next thing and take what he's learned from the previous thing and move to the next. But I don't know if it's the female brain or whatever. I'm trying to become more like that and less of a hot mess.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just think about it like very literally, where
So
I'm
does
like,
he. I'm like, you're the
yeah.
most literal fucking person I know, and I hate you. But I love you too. Because he's always like, Sarah, what's the next step? Like, why are you thinking about 3 weeks from now? Like, what's the next step? And I'm like, take the next step and shove it. And he does
Yeah.
not meditate. He's
Hmm.
just naturally like that, which makes it even more annoying.
Yeah, I mean, I just think like in any of those type of situations, it's like, what usefulness can we extract from it? And then, right, note it and move on.
And I think we think that other people care more than they do.
Of course, yeah, no
Like
one cares.
everyone
That
cares for a hot minute, or maybe like three girls knew about it. Like, oh, she started a podcast and it failed, whatever. But then everyone's on to their own shit.
totally. And if you need to get into the sort of like, I don't know, theatrical part of the brain, then you can think like, well, they didn't start a podcast. At least I tried. They haven't done
Right,
shit.
exactly. I mean, there's so many iterations of it.
Yeah.
Okay, number 8, finding meaning through growth. And then you have this idea where you delineate the differences between meaning of life versus meaning in life. I love
Hmm.
that. Will you talk about that?
Sure, thank you. Yeah. Meaning, people generally think about the meaning uh, of life. They confuse it with meaning in life. So the meaning of life is just living. It's very cut and dry. Like, well, what's the meaning of life? It's to live. Okay, cool. So now what? So what people are really looking at whenever they say meaning of life is they mean to be saying the meaning in life. So what is meaningful to you in your experience? What is meaningful to you personally, right? And so those things have to be cultivated. They aren't inherent. There's no meaning in life until we create it for ourselves. And so, how do we create it? It's through identifying what we like in life, what brings us joy, what makes us feel excited, what things do we love, who do we love, and then consciously applying more effort and energy and consistency into those things that make us feel those way. Doing that over time cultivates a richness and a resonance with those things that bring value to our existence, and therefore they generate the meaning that we're looking for. The nice thing is when you continue doing that, prioritizing the things that make you happy, that give you, you know, that make you feel this sense of wellness and energy and love, then that creates a sense of purpose because you have this thing that's meaningful to you or things you're putting energy into it. Now you feel like, hey, this is why I'm here, is to do these things, to go through these experiences. And then that generates a sense of fulfillment. And then once we feel, and that's just fulfillment is just meaning plus time, meaning
Right.
plus action, plus time equals fulfillment. And when we feel fulfilled, then we feel what I call the afterglow, like the afterglow. Like happiness is this afterglow of feeling fulfilled. Happiness is something to attain, is something that arises after we feel that sense of purpose and fulfillment.
I also love how you talk about how these things that we create meaning from, they don't have to be inherently amazing and they don't have to be the same as anyone else's. They can just be what you find goodness, clarity, and enjoyment in. Like, I guess my husband finds that in golf. He used to
Hmm.
not. He used to hate it, and then this past year, he's become obsessed with it. I have no idea why. I think it's also because he says he's like, "It gets me out of the office, it gets me outside, I get to interact with, like, a curated group of people who I really like," and he's like, "It kind of hits 12 birds with 1 stone." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Great." But when I look at it, I'm like, "Oh my god, that sounds like my worst nightmare." But what you're saying is it doesn't matter what his is or what hers are. It just matters what yours is, and it doesn't have to be this like hugely amazing Mother Teresa thing. It can be as basically inane as golf.
Yes, absolutely. And in some cases, I think it should be inane, because like if it's something um seismically large, then it might not be something that you're actually really interested in. It might be something that you're trying to aggrandize because you think that it needs to be big. Generally, the small things are where you'll find stuff that really excites you or the things that no one else is interested in. And then the secret is that things that become big become that way because someone was interested in something that was small and did it really well and had an authentic, genuine connection to it, and then it became big.
So true. I try to think of all the things I tried to make my kids do growing up. They were like, "Ew, yuck, I hate that." And I never made them do it. Like once they like signed up for soccer and someone didn't like it, I was like, "Okay, fine, you're out, but at least you tried it." I think for us, speaking as myself and for midlife women, a lot of times like we put these pressure on our kids like you have to try this, you have to go to the painting class, you have to take the ceramics thing. But then we don't do the same expectations on ourselves. We're like, "I'm not doing something new. That's weird. I'm not trying that."
Yeah, totally, totally. And
You
again,
know?
it's like just having that clarity that you just mentioned is really valuable because you can recognize it and then apply it to your own process, you know?
Okay, and then number 9 is who you're doing it with. It's
Yes.
mindful of who you're with, and you talk about this idea of the 5 people experiment.
Hmm.
Tell us
Yeah,
about
yeah.
that.
Yeah, I love this. People, there's a saying of like, uh, the 5 people that you're closest to are the combination of who you are, right? So if the 5 people that you spend the most time with, if you like those people, if you'd want to be more like those people, then you're in a pretty good situation because it means that they're kind of the aggregate of who you are, right? So it's a good way to consider just sort of like the company that you're keeping, what influences you have in your life, and then flipping that around and thinking of like uh if you enjoy the qualities of these people and you see these different aspects of yourself in them, then you can think of like, oh well, what parts of me are in these people, and you can then be mindful in trying to be a stronger version of that, for them in those situations, to then increase the positivity in their life as well.
I think another interesting aspect of this is being a midlife woman and the age that I'm at and you're almost at, if you added 7 years. Um, but is this idea of, you know, friendship audits.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Like not every friend is a lifetime friend. Some people just come into your life for that like rocket ship moment and then kind of disappear. That, different friends for different things, different friends for different times. And like, I even know, like with myself, I'm in this sort of like personal growth moment. So I feel like the friends who are part of their own personal growth I can resonate more with right now because we're sort of in the same boat. Whereas like some of my friends who have, let's say, younger kids, they're kind of in like mom mode and I'm sort of kind of veering a little bit out of mom mode
Mhm.
and back to
Yeah.
me mode. So it kind of changes your friendships a little bit or the priorities of your friendships.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And it's not a bad thing. It's like we have
Yeah.
this thing in culture where we feel like it's, if someone starts to sort of become distant in a relationship, that it's like, oh God, this is a tragic thing. It's like, no, we're all like these, we're just crossing through these different timelines of all these different moments in each other's lives. And, they resonate at different times and in different ways. And it's just a part of being human,
I
and
know you
having,
just feel so guilty and weird and it's personal. You feel like it's personal and you just have to remind yourself that everyone's in their own kind of version of their transition
yeah,
in
absolutely.
life,
Yeah.
which I try to remind myself all the time. Okay, number 10, this is going to be our final one because like I said, there could be 100. Don't settle.
Mm.
I love that. It's
Mhm.
so fucking juicy because it's so true. I feel like by the time we get to midlife, we're like, okay, I've been married to this person for 1,000 years. I've been living in the same city. I've been doing this. I've been going to this exercise class 3 times a week. And we're like, this is it. This is what my life is. This is the comfort zone. And you're saying in your book, no, 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 no. Don't get stuck in your grooves. Kind of edge out of the grooves a little bit and don't settle.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and this brings us back full circle to the beginning whenever I was talking about how just the patterns of our existence become well worn over time and normalized, and we adapt to what we've been doing for a long time. And once we begin raising that self-awareness and we start looking at the things that we want to let go of, the changes we want to make, the new things we want to introduce into our lives, then that raise of awareness allows us to see ourselves from a new perspective. It allows us to see the landscape of our lives with a different type of clarity, as if we were looking at it from someone else's eyes. We can see all these things. And then when we're able to see these things, that's when you have this moment of choosing, I'm not going to just go on with this because it's what's familiar. I'm not going to settle. I'm going to move into the unknown because, as we talked about earlier, like, you know, growth lives in the unknown. Like, if you're in the safe space, if you're in the comfort zone, there's not going to be any growth, and you're just going to be you're going to probably become more and more numb and less energized and less passionate, and that's then the fertile soil for resentment and for negativity and all these other things. And so just recognizing that there's all this possibility, all this potential, and that you really are worth the effort and you really do have the power to make those changes and to improve and change wherever you are in your life right now in the ways that you want.
I love that. And I think like taking it back to myself and my husband and, midlife women, I think with the longevity, our longevity getting longer and all the sort of health things that are making us live longer and the intentional choices that we're making, like lifting weights and drinking water and doing all the annoying things that we have to do, the second half of life is quite long.
Hmm.
And so it's like if you're packing up your bags and just saying like this is it for me at 50, wow, like you could have 30, 40 more years to go. And that's what my husband keeps saying. He's like, "Sarah, we're going to be empty nesters at 50." Like we can rent out our house. We could like get a condo in another state. We could like do
Hell
something
yeah.
totally fucking different. Our kids aren't going to be here. And like, you know, both of our sets of families live here, but he's like, there's airplanes. Like we can come back. We can live in different places. And I'm like, okay, but he's totally right. Like, cause if you look at your parents, you're like, oh my God, like they're amazing, but they're sort of living the same day over and over again.
Especially
And
my
he's
dad.
like, there's another way to do this. There has to
Yeah.
be another way to do this. It's a little bit more textured.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, from what you're saying, I agree. I believe he's correct.
Yeah. And
Yes,
I'm like,
it's
okay, okay, okay. And he's definitely like the one who's like pulling the rug out and going, okay, we got to like think of, some kind of cool things to do at 50. And
totally.
it's
And I,
not
you know,
midlife crisisy. It's like, let's do it together, but let's change the environment.
yeah, in a good way, if I were sitting with both of you and he was really pushing for it and you were like hesitant, I would say do an experiment.
Oh, totally.
So
I told him we're not selling our house.
yes, but do an experiment where you go, you rent the house,
Totally.
but for 3 months
Yeah.
or even for 1 month, and you
Yes.
just
Oh,
go,
no, that's part of the deal. That's
cool.
already been laid out. He's agreed to all of that. I'm like, I am not pulling the rug out from under me like all at once. And he's like, no, no, no. I'm like, because our kids still need a house to come home to when they come home from college, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I have one of my dear friends, his daughter went to college and they had a beautiful house in Asheville and good community of people and everything. And they'd actually built the house. So it was a new construction, it was kind of they designed it, it was very personal. And they just said, they were in the same position. They said, let's just sell the house and let's actually sell all of our belongings.
Oh my God. I'm not doing
So
that. I like
they
my
had
shoes too much.
they had an SUV and they just like, what can we fit in there? We'll put our clothes, put a couple of things
Wow.
here or there. They sold the house. They sold all of their furniture, everything, and they drove and moved to Bend, Oregon, and just live in this beautiful place in the mountains, giant lake. Just go hiking, and they've never been happier. So
Oh
it's
my
like
gosh.
it's possible.
Oh my gosh. I don't tell my husband that. I'm not moving to Bend, Oregon.
It looks beautiful. He
I
sends me
know. I'm like, I
pictures.
think I need a little bit more of a fast vibe, like in
Yeah.
between fast and slow. Okay, so before we wrap up, I know we've talked about so much stuff, but if you had one piece of advice for midlife women who are looking to up level, looking to kind of create that newer, braver version of themselves, what would it be? No pressure.
No, no, I don't feel any. No, I think I would say listen to what that voice in you is trying to tell you and don't talk yourself into dismissing it. The feelings and the thoughts that you have that are instructing you, the signals, the yearning of like, I wish I could do this, Or what if I could do this? Listen to that shit because that's the true self. That's your authentic, intuitive voice trying to communicate to you, to tell you what's going to make you happy. And we are taught our entire lives to ignore that voice, to talk ourselves out of it, to find a way to listen to what we think the world wants us to do instead of just listening to what we want to do. So I say, listen to that voice unapologetically and follow it, let it guide you, because that's what is going to lead you to what's going to make you truly happy.
Women know shit.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah.
Just speaking on behalf of all women. Okay. Where can people find you?
On all social platforms is Hey Cory Allen, and then my Substack is quite active. I'm always posting my newsletters over there every week, and then my website is cory-allen.com. And if you want to read a little bit about the book, you can go to bravenewyobook.com.
Oh my God, so good. You guys, I'm going to read the title of the book again. Brave New You, a roadmap to believing that more is possible. If I didn't have it downstairs, I would hold it up and show you all my notes. I'll send you photos after. I want to thank you. I loved your book. I loved our amazing discussion today. I can't wait for my husband to listen to it and be like, oh, she's going to become a meditator now. All the things. I want to thank you and just say that your book says that the only secret you have is to just start living as who you want to be.
That's right.
That's it, Cory.
Yeah.
That's it, right? That's all we
You
have to
just,
do.
you just get out of your own way. Yeah. And start doing it.
Hallelujah. Thank you so, so much for being here. I've loved this
Thank you.
conversation.
You.
I think there's some crazy statistic that 75% is not gene-based. It's lifestyle-based. So
That's,
then,
can we talk about the anti-inflammatory eating?
Yeah,
and all
we're
that
gonna
stuff?
do that right
biggest,
now.
That's the biggest thing. And that's part of the reason why I started it for other reasons, but it's really changed everything in my life by eating this way. And it's